That's
Great.
perfect. Thank you. Thank goodness that you're here. So I shall start again. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning um, for Chemistry Week for 2023. As ChemTalent, we wanted to celebrate it one way or another. And we're thinking about our three priorities, and one of them is bridging the skills gap. And the only way that we're going to do that is by promoting our industry to the next generation of STEM talent. So we thought about our own journeys and we decided to put this roundtable together on careers in chemistry and invite some of our special guests who we've got here today, who are all from whether it's industry, education establishments, and other bodies within those groups. And we're going to ask them questions, which is hopefully going to open up some discussion on those subjects. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as you can see, we've got the layout for this morning. We've got 6 different topics that we're going to discuss. There'll be 2 or 3 questions on each with presentation slides from members of ChemTalent on their journey so far. And as you can see at the right-hand side, the slogan for Chemistry Week this year was "Chemistry Making the World a Better Place," which I'm sure all of us will agree on that one. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we have some special guests with us here this morning. I'd like to cross paths before now. If we could all go around and spend maybe 2 minutes, a minute introducing ourselves, if that's possible. So Joy, I'd like to hand over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Yeah, so I'm the director of the Centre for Industry Education Collaboration. We're based in the Department of Chemistry at the University of York, but we're a national centre. And our remit is really to create partnerships between primary schools and industry. And historically, and still today, we create a lot of links with the chemical industry. So primary children get to meet those working in the sector.
Fantastic, thank you. Con?
Yeah, so my name's Dr. Con Robert McElroy. Most people know me as Rob. I'm a green and sustainable chemist, work here at the University of Lincoln. Before that, I was 11 years working in York. I do a lot of industry-focused research, so lots of applied chemistry, and also involved in outreach with a series of green chemistry-focused comics.
Fantastic. Charis?
Hi, yes, Charis McInnes, Sustainability Executive for the CIA. So I'm sure many of you all know that the CIA, we're a member organisation comprising over 250 different chemical and pharmaceutical manufacturers across the UK. I look after a network called the Sustainability Strategy Group, and we look at anything from chemical recycling, sustainable finance and reporting, biodiversity, and a huge broad church of other sustainability topics.
Thank you. Aileen?
Hi everyone, so I'm Aileen Peters. I'm Senior HR Business Partner at Solenis. We're a member company of the CIA. I also take part in the Employment and Education Strategy group on the CIA. So really interested to learn more to help us with the challenges that we have, getting people into STEM subjects and then into employment at our companies.
Thank you. And last but not least, from our special guest this morning, Vienna.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. I'm Vienna McAndie. I'm our Employer Partnership Manager for STEM Learning's STEM Ambassador Programme. So the STEM Learning is an organisation supporting STEM education for young people from the age of 5 up to 19. And my role specifically is to work with organisations like yourself, get all of your employees and members active as volunteers and put them in front of children and support teachers and young people and their parents to consider chemistry as potentially a career for them.
Fantastic, thank you. And there is 5 of us joining this morning from ChemTalent. I've had apologies from James this morning. Throughout the presentation, we are going to present a slide each on our career journey so far. So if we'd all like to introduce ourselves very briefly, because there'll definitely be more to come in the different segments. So Lucy.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Lucy Jones. I work for Croda, one of the CIA member companies, on their graduate development programme, and yeah, also one of the ChemTalent representatives.
Izzy?
Hi everyone, I'm Izzy Sloan. I work for GSK. I'm a chemical engineering degree apprentice in my 4th year, and yeah, also I was the ChemTalent Young Ambassador last year and then continued in the group this year.
And I'll introduce myself briefly. My name is Amy Summerton, and I am the ChemTalent Young Ambassador for 2023-24. I've been in the role since June, but my my actual job, my day job, is I work for Savic Europe. I'm based on Teesside at the moment. I'm a research chemist. I'm working within a feedstocks and cracker team, and I'm also on quite a few sustainability projects at the moment. Imogen?
Hi, I'm Imogen Foy. I work for Venator and I'm a Senior Product and Application Development Technologist.
Thank you. And Chantel?
Hi, I'm Chantel. I work for Stepan as a QC apprentice within the quality lab at Stepan and studying for a degree in chemical science.
Thank you. So I hope everyone's a bit more, has a clue on what everyone does and where they've came from. And if move on to the next slide, please, Diana. So, who are ChemTalent? For those who don't know, ChemTalent is a network of people working in the chemical and pharmaceutical businesses across the UK. The majority of us are in the first 10 years of our careers, and we're keen on broadening our skills and being a voice on behalf of the UK chemical industry. When I joined ChemTalent in June, we sort of had a switch up of the setup of it, and 3 priorities were created. You can see those to the left of your screen: promoting the chemical industry, changing perceptions, and bridging the skills gap. So at the moment, ChemTalent is made up of 17 representatives on the committee. We meet once per month, organising events as such. And then we have a wider network of 200 members across the UK. And these people aren't particularly in industry roles at the moment. They can be students, graduates, people even in college who are looking to get into the industry. Next slide, please, Diana. So that brings us to the first segment of our roundtable this morning: different career paths. And if we could move forward, I think first up we have Imogen presenting on her career journey so far before we lead into the questions. So the floor's all yours, Imogen. Thank you.
So as you might be able to guess from this, I followed the fairly standard college university job route. So I did my A-levels, chemistry, maths, biology, physics, and further maths at AS because I really enjoyed maths. And then I went to the University of Bristol to study chemical physics, which was the choice between, I couldn't decide between chemistry and physics, so I did chemical physics, which is the bits of physics that look like chemistry and the bits of chemistry that look like physics. So it worked well for me. And after leaving university, I contemplated being a teacher. I went back to my old sixth form college to be a science technician, where I actually taught some physics lessons as well. I realised that teaching definitely was not for me. It did not take me very long to decide that. And I started looking for jobs in the industry around Teesside, where I'd grown up. So I started as a contractor with Venator as an analytical technologist, working in the analytical labs, testing our products, byproducts, and anything that was going slightly wrong on the plants. Any issues they had, we investigated for them. During that role, it then got advertised. I was taken on as a full-time associate, and not long after that, I was offered a secondment in the supply chain team. So I worked as a micro planner for about 18 months in supply chain, with making sure that all the systems were working as they should be, materials going to who it was meant to go to, when it was meant to go to, and just checking all of the orders that customer services were sending out. When that secondment ended, I did go back to analytical for about 2 months before I joined the product and application development team in the coating segment. I stayed there for about a year before becoming the senior product and application development technologist, which is just a very long job title. But basically, I work with making new grades of pigments, testing them in all the systems we use to see how well they'll work for our customers, and developing new applications that we could put them in and formulations that we could give to our customers, focusing mostly on high solids, bio-based resins and the more sustainable things going on, rather than trying to keep with the high volatile organic compound levels that everyone is trying to phase out currently.
Great, thank you. And thank you for kicking us off there, Imogen. I think your career path's quite interesting because, yes, it is conventional at the beginning, but for someone who studied chemical physics to end up in supply chain but doing something that's completely relevant to chemistry is interesting. And if we could move on to the next slide, please, Diana. I'm going to kick off with the first question. I'll leave the table open, so anyone who wants to answer, please feel free to. And if someone's answering, raise your hand and we'll go from there. So, can you highlight some examples where skills you learnt while studying chemistry you use now in your role? This is open to anyone on the table.
I'll just jump in since I've just been talking. So as I mentioned, my degree was sort of half and half. So I worked between the School of Chemistry and the Department of Physics. And despite the fact that the degree programme has been well established and was about 30, 40 years old at the time, there still wasn't a lot of collaboration between the two departments. So we were sort of left fighting for ourselves either way. So we learned adaptability and how to balance different customers very quickly, just to make sure that we were not forgotten. We knew what we were doing. We had to fight to make sure that we didn't have lectures overlapping and that we had time to get between them. But the adaptability has been really, really useful going forward, just being able to swap between what we do in 1 second to something else the next.
Yeah, that's interesting because I kind of expected a technical answer there, but you forget about all the soft skills that come with these kind of things. So thank you for that. Would anyone else like to add?
Well,
No?
I'm happy to jump in, but my chemistry was a heck of a long time ago. I did chemistry many years ago, 40 years ago, and then went on to do chemical engineering. But one of the things that stands out from my chemistry A level, I'll talk about my A level, was that we did at the time a course that was relatively different to the others, Nuffield chemistry, and some of you may have done Salter's A level chemistry, in the fact that it was very practical. And we were able to carry out our own investigation. We could plan it and we could carry it out ourselves. Now, at that time, this was pretty unique. My school education up until then was you were told what to do. You were given practicals to do. You weren't allowed to plan anything yourself. So at A level, it was the first chance I got to do it. Now, wind forward to what I'm doing now, which is ensuring that primary children get to do really hands-on practical science and have to plan their own investigations. And I really appreciated how it made you feel, even at 17, really responsible that I was planning my own investigation. And so to instill that in young children, that they can plan and carry out their own experiments and investigations, is something that's really important to me, that we get young children all the way through from 5 upwards doing that kind of activity.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that answer, Joy. I mean, obviously you said it was 40 years ago, but I think we still face some of them challenges now. And I know when I think back to when I was studying, even like in secondary school, it is a lot of textbook and do this, but don't do that, and do this, without the scope to plan and think about these things for yourself. So thank you. Diana, if we could move on to the next question. Oh, Con has got his hand up there.
I was just wondering if you wanted another input there. I mean, I guess,
Absolutely.
as you know, as an academic, I'm using a lot of the hard skills, as we call them, so-called hard skills and soft skills, all the time, which people wouldn't be surprised about. But it's the things like having to present your work and discuss what you were doing to a wide range. So you'd be doing it to your peers, you'd be doing it at outreach events, or you'd be doing it to children. And I remember we did a big event in Hanley, so a shopping centre in Stoke-on-Trent, where we built a big DNA model, and you were chatting about it to the public that were coming in there. So you were taught how to convey what you were doing to different people, and for it not to lose meaning but still be interesting. And I think that also as well in chemistry, it was the first, the sort of these sort of things that you were doing, and you were chatting, say, to industry. It was the first time for me as a person that you were getting taken really quite seriously, and you realised that people were listening to what you were saying, and it instilled, gave you a sense of self-worth and confidence, but then also meant that you had to think very carefully about what it was that you were saying to make sure that there was no you weren't going to say anything incorrect or that'd be perceived in the wrong way. So these soft business critical skills, or basically how to be a good person and how to work in a nice environment, all these things come in from chemistry. I think it comes in from any science, but they're the things that you learn that you don't realize that you're going to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I always try and remember is these people were here once, they've been here in this position too. So, everyone kind of has to understand. So thank you for that input. Diana, could you move on to the next question, please? If someone had asked 12-year-old you how you perceived chemistry to if someone asked you now, how would you respond? How has it changed from when you left school or university to now? And I'm going to go straight to Charis. I can see she's got her hand up there.
I would just quickly preface that I don't actually have a chemistry background, but even from working at CIA for the last year and a bit, my perception of the chemical industry has changed massively. I did a presentation to some university students maybe back in February of this year, and started with a question very similar to this, kind of what's your perception of the chemical industries? And a lot of the responses were it's very polluting, it's a little bit irrelevant, slightly outdated. And having worked in this role for, as I say, a year and a bit now, you're kind of amazed by all the innovation that's coming along in the chemical sector, especially with like decarbonisation, innovation with so many different sustainable solutions. And you look at the extent, I mean, there's a stat I know we love at CIA, it's something like 96% of manufactured goods rely on chemicals in one way or another. And you do just see like the extensive breadth that chemicals have, and the big impact it has on everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I totally resonate with that, because coming from what is at the end of the day a company that makes plastic, and you go into school children and say, oh, it's how big basically we make plastic. They're like, oh my, no, the turtles. And I'm like, no, just listen, just give me one moment. So I'll move on to that. Chantal?
Hi, I think for me, 12-year-old me, I don't think chemistry felt particularly accessible. I remember even at my primary school, I remember our head teacher going around doing one topic, one lesson, kind of catch-ups, because we were so far behind in science, we'd just not really done it. And I remember going into secondary school, and I remember the teacher had set up a kind of scavenger hunt where we had to go around the lab and name all the equipment, and I didn't know what anything was. And I remember just following somebody else around and like seeing what they were putting, and because I had no idea really. And I guess I didn't even really particularly ever envision myself as a scientist up until a few years ago, really. And I guess for me, now I would say that I do see it more accessible now. What I'll probably come to later is kind of the active role I've taken in kind of EDI in chemistry, and I think there's a real drive now to get that diversity in chemistry, because it's needed to resolve all the global challenges. We need diversity in thought and skills, and we're facing an aging population, and disability is already one of the largest minority groups in the workforce. And I think, as the workforce ages, it's going to become more and more something that companies are going to have to think about, how they make it accessible, how they open up chemistry to a wider audience. So I guess that's my perspective, really, that it's changed a lot for me in how accessible I feel science has become.
Thank you, Chantal, and I look forward to when you present your slide later on in the deck, because it will reveal a lot about what you've just spoken about and all the fantastic things that you do on that subject. Aileen?
Yeah, so I've got I guess a similar background to Charis in the fact that I don't have a chemistry background. The last time I studied chemistry was in high school. But I guess if you'd asked me when I was 12 years old what I thought about chemistry, I would have said that it was really boring and it probably wasn't something that really interested me at all. Mixing different chemicals in beakers and having slight chemical reactions, I'm not really sure it was something that I could see a job. I've been working in HR within the chemical industry now for 21 and a half years, and I always remember the first time 20 odd years ago when I walked into a laboratory and someone actually showed me at the bench how to make pigment for the first time, and actually just seeing the change, something really strange mixing together and becoming like a blood red pigment, and it'll always stick with me since then. And then I guess now that I've obviously worked for our organisation for such a long time, I've seen the fact that chemistry touches each one of us multiple times throughout the day, from sleeping in your bed, there's chemistry in your mattress, to getting up and using your facilities, to using all your beauty products, and then getting into your car and the chemistry that's in your car, and then coming to work, and absolutely every single thing that you do every day has chemistry in it. So I think if I was asked that question now, I would have that complete different perspective, and I think I would help people understand that there's so much that we all use chemistry for that we maybe don't always appreciate.
Oh, thank you. I like that analogy. I like the way that you put that. I might try and use that on some of my friends when I'm trying to convince them that chemistry is really interesting. I think it is, but so Diana. Oh no, we've got Joy. We've got Joy. Do you like to go?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I've raised my hands twice, but there you go. Yeah, so 12-year-old me, I grew up in Billingham on Teesside, ICI on the doorstep, now gone, but lots of other great companies in its place. I had a fantastic chemistry teacher. And so it's interesting that you said it was boring, Aileen, because I just had a complete opposite experience, because the teacher I had, Mr. Shovels, still sticks in my head to this day. The kind of things we did, however, you probably aren't allowed to do today, like throwing big bits of sodium into water and him saying, shall I put a bigger piece in? Shall I put a bigger piece in? And we were like, yes, yes. And of course, the little screen doesn't do enough probably. But so I have really good memories of chemistry. And I think the teacher you have and how they teach it can make that difference between whether it's boring or whether you get really hooked and really interested in it. The other thing I wanted to say was, you talked about pollution, and I can't remember who talked about pollution, but the idea that children these days, if you're not careful, think that's what industry makes, pollution. So we have to get across all those things you said, Aileen, that every different thing, but it's getting it relevant in a way that you're not saying it so broadly that they understand the individual things that relate to chemistry. But at the time, you know, I thought ICI was just this place that had a lot of smoke coming out of a lot of chimneys. You know, it probably took me till A level, which is 17, 18, before, you know, that age-old message, they're cooling towers, that you get those things across. Then when I went on to teaching, I discovered this, the centre that I work in now, and I just thought, how on earth do you get chemical engineering across to 10 or 12-year-olds? Because although I was a teacher and I'd got a chemical engineering degree, I still didn't understand how you could really make this strong connection. I do now, because obviously I work for the centre, that's what we spend our time doing. But it's quite hard to work out how to get those messages across. So even though I had the teaching background and the engineering background, in effect, I had to learn how best to convey those messages. so that children of that age really understand where their chemistry, their physics, their maths can take them in the future, because otherwise 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds just think you have to be good at design technology, don't you, to be an engineer? You don't have to have science and maths. So getting that connection between the science and the maths and future careers is something that's really important. So at 12, I love chemistry, but at that time, I probably wouldn't have thought that I might go on to do chemical engineering. That took connections with industry for me to have that, you know, that desire to take my own chemistry further.
Thank you. And I think what you've just said there, especially about growing up in Billingham, myself and Imogen can probably relate to this because we're from Teesside as well. I grew up and I'd see Seal Sands, I'd see Wilton Site, I'd see it all the time, and I thought it was a cloud factory. They made clouds. That was honestly my perception up until I was probably, I don't know, 10. And then when you start studying, you know, things a bit further in probably when you get to A level, that's when you start to understand. But you're so right, these things that are on a lot of people's doorsteps as well. It's making that connection between one and the other. Diana, could I ask you to move to the next slide, please? What do you wish you knew while doing your degree? What do you know now that you wish you'd have known back then? I'll go straight to Lucy.
Yeah, something for me definitely studying chemistry was that things don't always work the first time, and that's okay. That's quite common actually. I knew there'd be kind of times where I'd be in the lab doing practicals and things, and yeah, sometimes it would go wrong or wouldn't get the result I was expecting. And to start with, that seemed like the worst thing ever. But actually, over time, I learned that, you know, it's still part of the learning process, even when experiments don't work. And that really translates into kind of industry, really, whether it's in the lab or something else. If you're trying something new, it doesn't always work out, but it's all part of it. So yeah, I think the earlier I recognised that, I think it would have helped in my degree. Yeah.
I'm totally relating to what you've just said, from going to what was an analytical role to a research role. I found that really hard to get my head around. It's like, I've just wasted 6 months. And they're like, no, you're learning. I was like, no, it's a waste. But I understand exactly what you say there. It can be quite disappointing. I'll go to Con.
Yeah, well, I guess just to echo that one. Definitely a similar experience, and also learning that when things go wrong, I guess echoing what you were saying as well, it's not a negative, there's still positives from that. And I think the other thing for me as well is, I really concentrated on the bits that gripped me, which was organic chemistry, anything with a carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen in it. But everything's much more interconnected than I thought. But then you went in with this very segmented idea, and even which is silly because I was doing chemistry and biochemistry as a degree. So you should have known how interlocked they were. But that was sort of something that you only realised later on that these boundaries that we're putting in are entirely made by us. And the really biology and chemistry, physics and chemistry, physics and maths, it's just all one long continuum, and so you shouldn't disregard any of it because you don't like it, because it's all important.
Absolutely, and I think that's something I kick myself for a little bit, because I was like, I always said I hated physics, but here I am studying chemical engineering, which appears to be a crazy amount of physics. And I don't think we've got any more hands up. So Diana, would you like to move on the slide, please? So James couldn't be with us this morning. He's had an emergency that's cropped up. So James I'll quickly go through his slide and then we can move forward after that. And it's obviously a shame that he's not here. James is at Solenis, the same as Aileen. He is an inbound logistics specialist. So where it began, no understanding, knowledge or experience on the chemical industry or supply chain, so he didn't really know. And then he did an apprenticeship at Solenis. In his next steps, he moved to supply chain, completed the apprenticeship, given a full-time position. He's now a logistics specialist. He's in the supply chain environment, obviously still. and he's working towards his accreditations. And I think James is quite different because we all sort of came to the table today, apart from perhaps yourself, Aileen, on a chemistry-based background, but it's kind of proof that, yes, like we don't necessarily do chemistry directly in our role, but we still work for a chemical company. And those things can still work together and you can still have that appreciation of it. So I apologise on behalf of James there, and we'll just move on. Industry and education collaboration. I can imagine that a few of our special guests, this one might ring quite familiar to those. So if we move forward, I'd like to welcome Izzy to the floor to tell us a little bit about her journey so far.
Hi everyone, so yeah, mine's a little bit different to kind of what Imogen's went through. So I'm a 4th year apprentice chemical engineering with GSK. So I'm very, very new into the industry. And so I picked my A-levels, maths, chemistry, geography, purely on what I enjoyed at school, not kind of knowing which route to go down. I think at one point I was very close to wanting to do English literature at university, so you can imagine kind of where my head was. I just didn't have a clue. And then it was my mum actually that just stumbled across the chemical engineering apprenticeship on GSK's website, sent it through and said, oh, is this maybe something that you'd be interested in? And I had absolutely no idea what really chemical engineering was until the interview. So I went through all of the interview process, got to the interview, and I remember learning more about chemical engineering in the interview than I'd ever learned during school. Because I feel like school kind of always pushed that university route, and then kind of girls go down one route, boys down another. Even kind of in this day and age, I still kind of felt that in school. So yeah, I thought chemical engineering was lots of chemistry, which it is, but it is a lot of maths and a lot of physics, which I don't mind because I do quite like kind of all of the mathsy bits as well. So I took on my apprenticeship and I started working at Ulverston, which is in the northwest. So GSK, I'm part of the supply chain for a specific antibiotic. So I worked on the primary manufacturing site at Ulverston, done quite a lot of true process engineering, so a lot of calculations, lots of problem solving. Absolutely loved it, and it went hand in hand with what I'm doing at the minute, which is day release university, to reach obtaining a chemical engineering bachelor's degree. So I do that with the University of Strathclyde. I do that on day release, all remote, and then kind of go up to Glasgow for a nice trip once in a while for university exams. So yeah, it's a nice balance between both, and I think I see some of it goes hand in hand with the studying, but also I'm quite glad that I've got that industry mindset to know if I'm really struggling with a bit of my degree, it's okay. I'm never ever going to have to use that again. It's quite nice to see in that sense, but then it's also nice to see where kind of everything marries up and they do help you through. I know in one of my modules I got a really high mark because it was also with process safety, and that's kind of everything that I do at the minute, which is nice to see how it can both benefit each other. So after that, last year, I moved onto the secondary antibiotic manufacturing site. So kind of working my way through the supply chain and now work at Barnard Castle. So it's a little bit different, my role here. I do a lot of process safety. So for those of you who don't know, it's basically stopping massive explosions. So it's all really about chemistry on a larger scale. How do we scale up them little reactions that we learn about in school, and prevent explosions, prevent other things like that, and what control measures we've got in place. So it's all to do with like piping, instrumentation, valves, something that I never even considered at school. So at the minute I'm focusing on project engineering. So it's a lot of document writing, working with different contractors, and stuff that you definitely wouldn't come across within university. So at the minute I'm working my way through that. I've got another year left after this, but what's next? So at the minute you can kind of see on that little map, that's kind of where all GSK sites are in the UK. So I've been lucky enough to work on 2 different sites, live in 2 different locations, and also I obviously go to Glasgow for university. I've done different STEM events all across the school, visited the headquarters, and I'm hoping kind of in the future I could maybe go down different pathways and maybe go out of the country. So I know I'm going to come out with 5 years of industry experience, a degree that I can kind of use anywhere. So if chemical engineering turns out not to be the thing for me, it's a great transferable degree anyways, with no student debt. And I've also developed kind of a network that I'm kind of working on and kind of get that head start to normal people who just take the university route. So yeah, that's a quick whistle stop tour.
Thank you, Izzy, and thank you for giving us. I feel like it's such a brief insight into all the fantastic things you've done so far within your apprenticeship, and I can only echo the pros of doing that route, which you have put there at the end. So thank you very much. And can we move forward with the next question? I'm just getting a little bit conscious of time now, but I think we're okay. Bridging the skills gap. What is the most important ages to target the future STEM talent? And I have a feeling some special guests are going to come into this now. There we go. Vienna, thank you.
Everybody, sorry, I've just got my headphones. Yes, we all know this, as young as possible. We already are very aware that children are as young, and it's interesting you use the age 12 before. We have identified that that's actually the age where children have already decided that STEM chemistry is not for them. So we already need to widen that understanding of where careers could be much, much, much earlier. So that's as soon as they go to school. Any opportunities, let's start the careers job support where opportunities are as young as possible. So when they get to the age of 12, when they already have lost all their confidence, their opportunities is already still a wide pool. And it's an analogy that one of the organisations that we work with, FixYouCan, uses. But absolutely, let's make sure that as young as possible, they're considering it potentially for them. And so when we have reduced and they're at the minimum amount of openness to consider themselves as a STEM professional, it's still a really wide pool of opportunities available for them. So really primary school age, first key stages that we really need to get at that, show them not just the subjects that they could do, but the opportunities available. And that's also educating the teachers about those ages as well, to make sure they're aware of the opportunities available for these young people.
Thank you. And I think what you said last there, especially about the teachers, having that link with the teachers, is one of the most important things that we found at SAVIC when we've been going into local schools and local universities. Not necessarily the universities as much, but the schools. It's getting the teacher involved and telling the teacher more about these things, because they've never been in industry, and it's hard to make that connection without us going forward and saying, look, how about this? What do you think of this? And they're often excited alongside the children as well, and I think that's a big part of it. So move forward to Con.
On our third in the list, Chantal, is it next?
Yes, you're right. I've got so many hands up for this one. It's clearly got a lot of people excited. Chantal.
Hi, I think it's got to be across the ages. I think it's got to be embedded into people's kind of consciousness, and they've got to get that familiarity with the industry, because I think there's still something, like, I don't know if you all remember the first time you put on a lab coat and you felt like, I felt like I was playing dress up. And I think it's kind of like that feeling of like science is being something other and not part of your daily life. And I think you've got to be there at all the different stages rather than just like a one-off event. So it's incorporated into people's daily lives, and it feels achievable and familiar. And yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you. I've got Con and Joy. I don't know which order that's came up in, so
Shall I go next? Okay.
Go on then.
So yeah, I'm to some extent reiterating what people have said. I think it was Chantal said every key stage, you start young, but it can't just be a one-off. So I think that what's important is that people in industry make a connection with primary, with beginning of secondary, upper secondary, and so on. It has to start young. I mean, our research and other national research, we carry out this research every year. We regularly get that children aged 10, 11, 85 to 90+% of children that age really enjoy science. They really enjoy it at primary school. You ask those same children, which we do, would you like to do anything with your science when you leave school or when you've got an opportunity to make a choice towards the end of secondary school? That figure drops to 15%. So you've got all these kids loving science, but don't see it as for people like them, people like me. It's a phrase we use a lot, people like me. So meeting people from industry from a very young age that look like them, sound like them, have, the same accent, whatever it is, these things really matter. And, you know, with EDI, we talk about getting more women into engineering. We need to see representation from ethnic minorities. We've got to seed those desires early on. And talking about the skills in particular, I mean, we talked about soft skills. Other terms for that are more like core skills, essential skills, transferable skills. You know, I think, Izzy, you talked about your degree being transferable. You know, these things really matter, and getting children at a young age to realise that these core skills are actually really important in the workplace, because otherwise those young primary children or see something that's a person in isolation at a lab bench, an Einstein type character, not for people like me. But if you say, well, actually, you work in teams and there's men and women, and they're local to where you are, these things are really important. And like I say, start young and keep making those connections all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to reiterate an awful lot of what's been said, but you know, so the comics that we make are aimed at Key Stage 2 children, and for that very reason that we want to grab the kids while they're young and keep them excited. They've all got a very strong sustainability ethos to them, and we're also wanting to make them representative. So if you look through them, you know, you'll see a lot of diversity in there, and it is important to engage children early, and also to show you know, how exciting and invigorating the chemical industry can be. The other bonus of them is, as well, is, you know, we've made them, they're exciting. I mean, I can't claim any of the artistic talent in there at all. I'm just there to make sure the science is right. But you know, they're good fun to read, and so you're getting the reluctant readers in, and you're then able to sort of crowbar a bit of science into another part of the curriculum that you wouldn't maybe expect it in. And then the other thing from the outreach, and it's just echoing what Joy has just said as well, you know, kids, they love doing a bit of science. They like doing, you know, I remember when my daughter was 8, and with no prompting by me at all, she asked if she could have a science birthday party, and I was like, yeah, you know, but the amount of time that kids spent with cabbage indicator that we've made, working out whether things in the home were acidic or basic or neutral, and they were engaged for ages, and it was brilliant, and they still talk about it now. So yeah, get them early and keep them enthused.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for your answers there. I'm going to just move on because I am really conscious of the time as we move further forward. So Diana, if we can just move on to the next slide. So this is a big question. I could probably talk about this one for quite a while, and I can see Izzy's hand's gone straight up there. Do you see a disconnect between industry and education? If so, how can we begin to close the gap? And I'll let the floodgates open.
I'll just jump in because I'm quite an advocate for apprenticeships, especially the one that I'm on at the minute. As I kind of briefly explained before, there's a lot of industrial placement students, graduate students that I've met that haven't even seen what a valve looks like before, whereas I came in on my first day of my apprenticeship and knew what a valve looked like, how it worked, before I even had a lecture on it. There's so much more that you can learn from industry, and pairing that with your education, although it's really hard with time management and things, there's so much to be learned. And I do really feel that apprenticeships across all different levels, across all different subjects, especially within this industry, is the key to going forward with that. I can kind of just show kind of the growth I've went from starting within the industry until where I am now, and I think that is a lot to do with kind of the balance between learning while I am on the job as well. So I literally came in really shy. You can imagine first day at work, coming out of sixth form, right after lockdown with COVID and stuff. Didn't really know where to put myself. I was in a room surrounded with like kind of older men. Didn't really know who to ask questions. Was really shy. No one to really look up to. And then I kind of had that support network that came in with university, learning that on the side as well. So you have all your different lecturers, you have kind of like your apprentice manager, you have loads of different people that you can relate to, which can help you through your education route as well. And now down the line, 4 years, I'm managing projects nearly all by myself, speaking to contractors, know who to speak to within the company. I am classed as kind of like a specialist in some certain part of process safety, able to deliver training to operators, get them more involved, really not even just take the workload off other people, but learn so much myself. And yeah, I just think apprenticeships are the way forward with that. Get both of them at the same time, and then you've kind of got the key to getting someone into your company, get them to stay through, and really just learning and developing as best as possible. Yeah.
Thanks, Izzy. I could almost be a parrot for what you've just said there, as you'll see from when I share a little bit about my career journey a bit further on. I'll move on to Joy. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Izzy, when you gave your explanation of chemical engineering, I thought, yeah, absolutely brilliant. Your comm skills are fantastic for talking about it. And my degree was very academic, and that idea of what was actually a valve didn't come into the degree really much at all. And I think that whole route of apprenticeships is so important. And I think a lot of the work we do is getting primary children into industry on Teesside, Humber, Northwest, Hertfordshire, wherever the company is, getting children in from a young age so they can actually make that connection, because there is otherwise a potentially big, strong disconnect between education and industry. Not many teachers have worked in industry, so it's about, like others have said, getting teachers to learn as well alongside the children that they're teaching. And once you've worked with a teacher, they can then, you know, use those messages, repeat those messages again and again with every child they teach year on year. So getting those teachers involved is so important. But like you were saying, the apprenticeship route, we need to get more teachers making children aware of that. And Izzy, I'd be delighted to work with you, because obviously, you know, we still need women to be coming to go into chemical engineering as well. And I think if an apprenticeship degree had existed at the time that I did mine, I probably would have gone for that, because of that stronger connection between education and academia all the way through your studies is absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I'm all for education, teachers, children connecting with industry, whether it's people going into industry, children going into industry, which I think is the gold standard of what we should be trying to do, but also obviously people from industry going into classrooms as well has an impact too.
Thank you, Joy. And move on to Aileen, because I think that you do need to leave the meeting. I can see your hands up.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to build on some of the things that I guess we've heard already, because I think for obviously I've been in HR in the chemical industry for over 20 years, and I've seen people come through all different types of routes. So people come through the traditional apprenticeship route, some people coming in as a graduate and then training up, and then people coming in maybe after, I guess, their masters or whatever it might be, or even coming in after they've had their PhD and then joining the organisation. So all different types of routes, but I've personally felt that we've become more distanced from education. So I definitely felt, certainly my first 10 years in HR, that we worked a lot closer with universities, with local colleges. Certainly a lot of our skilled workers spent time at the universities. They spent time in the colleges, taking part in guest lectures. We also had a lot more work experience and internships that were managed because of the relationship. And I feel as if that is disconnected over the recent past. And I know certainly in West Yorkshire, a lot of private sector companies came together and had this discussion about where the gaps were, and that we needed this exposure to the industry. We needed this exposure to the type of equipment that we used, and let people see that when they were at college. And a lot of money was invested to actually build sort of a technical environment that looked something similar to what it looks like on our plants. And that was at Kirklees College. And then basically what happened is the education providers weren't capable or able to teach in that environment because of turnover of staff. And actually what became apparent is that facility then stopped being used, and it's not used now at all. And I felt that probably what it needed was volunteers from the private sector to go in and do guest lectures and things like that. But again, because of financing and resources are stretched in the industry and member companies, it's quite difficult to invest in that. So I think there is a much bigger issue, but maybe getting back to that core of building that relationship again and having those core relationships with the industry and with education, it might start to build some of those bridges and build at least some of that gap again, because we did it well in the past. Sorry, I know that was quite a long answer.
Thank you for sharing that. And I also think that's no, I'm quite disappointed, to be honest, to find out about that place that had all been set up, but then we don't have the resource and yeah, that's quite disappointing. And yeah, you're right, we need to get back to the core of making that relationship again. So thank you. Vienna?
Just quickly, I mean, of course, obviously, I absolutely echo everyone else's comments. We at STEM Learning have the STEM Ambassador Programme, which I mentioned before. So this is bridging that gap between industry and education. We have around about 30,000 volunteers that are from various industries across sectors. And of these, about 6,000 of them identify having skills in chemistry. So just by their everyday volunteering, talking about their career journeys, especially when it's a kind of what we used to call an unconventional kind of route into where they are, but actually it's absolutely key right now, your apprenticeships for sure. Having these people in front of young people, their teachers, and obviously them going back to their parents is absolutely bridging that gap. In addition to that, STEM Learning has a teacher CPD. So we're training up the teachers alongside the professionals that are the volunteers in the industry to support teachers who are in the classroom. Perhaps they don't have they might not have a science background, but they're expected to teach the curriculum. So they're training up to be as best teachers as possible, whilst also being trained alongside the volunteers from industry, which is giving them that industry background and knowledge. So it's how we're starting to bridge the gap for sure. And obviously these kind of collaborations are key.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing about what STEM Learning is doing at the moment. And we appreciate that. I'm just going to ask you to move on to the next slide, please, Diana. What changes have you seen within your career alone, within the industry and education collaboration? I feel like we've had a brief bit of discussion on that so far. I mean, I can see that Joy is smiling there as she read that, that question. So what have we seen as the changes? Con, we'll go straight to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, so I did an MPhil and then did a PhD, and both of those were very industry focused. So it was a company that had a very real problem that they wanted to solve in terms of their sustainability issues and bringing new products in. But that was quite rare. And you know, when I told people when I was, you know, that I was going to be a green or sustainable chemist, then you know people laughed because they're like, it's a bit niche, you know, it's never going to take off. What are you doing? And now there's a lot. I mean, there's still blue sky research that goes on in universities, and that's definitely got its place. But obviously, I'm an advocate for applied research, and there's a lot more close collaboration between industry and academia, where it's not academics going to industry and saying, oh, you know, I could do this or I could do that for you, but listening to what the industry issue is and trying to come up with a solution for that. So I mean, I've seen that change. That's become much more commonplace, and it makes sense as well, because then you're actually doing something that's going to make an impact. And then also, you know, sustainability, circular economy, decarbonisation, defossilization, you know, these are all things that people are talking about. You know, things like, you know, different routes of production. You know, fermentation was proper niche when I was starting out. You know, every large chemical company's got something that's involved with a fermentation at some point on their process these days. So I mean, that's the big shift that I've seen. Not enough, but we're going in the right direction.
Thank you. Who'd have thought green chemistry would take off? Yeah, that it makes sense. I'll just move forward to Joy. Thank you.
So I would say over the many years that I've been doing this, that one of the things that I've noticed is we are getting more and more girls interested in the careers. There's a big push, and I think there's a lot of evidence to show we are making that shift. I would say we're making less progress with ethnic minorities, and I think that that's a big area that we should still be focusing on. I think that we've really seen a shift in terms of the interest from industry and from primary schools to make connections. So in primary schools, we've always been keen on, advocating STEM careers, but primary schools are now very interested in that. So we're getting approached by schools saying, yeah, we want to work with careers, we want to show children what's in their area. I would say with the whole shift towards sustainability and those messages from industry, there's now, I think, more interest in both ways, both parties, I think, industry and schools. I think it's a really good time to strengthen those connections, because we're getting companies coming to us now saying, how can we connect with primary schools? Primary schools are coming to us saying, how do we connect with industry? So I think it's a really good time to make those stronger connections that I think it was Aileen was saying maybe not as strong as they were. I mean, we work with companies that have it really is to do with the passion of the people in the company as well. So I would say over the years, what I've really noticed is whether a company is large or small, if somebody in the senior management is keen on making those connections, it will happen. And that's what's needed. So Micropore in Wilton, they have 2 classes of children visit them every year. There's about 10 people work there, 3 or 4 in the lab, and yet they still take 2 classes of children to visit them every year. And larger companies will say, oh, we can't possibly have 2 visits every year. It's all to do with the enthusiasm and motivation. And I think we're looking at a good time to really develop those links now.
Thank you, Joy. And we've got another hand up there. Is it Charis? Charis, thank you.
Yeah, I just echo some of what Rob said in terms of sustainability space. I think there's been, even just having worked about a year and a half here, huge uptake in whether it's reporting on sustainability or that's changing processes. I know we had Croda speak at our sustainability conference a couple of weeks ago, and they were really highlighting their batch to continuous processes, all about efficiency and emission savings. Also, Croda, a huge one of our members, really leading the way in terms of biodiversity, and they've got a net nature positive goal. I think it's just the general conversation around sustainability is becoming more and more noticed, and something that's, whether it's being demanded from stakeholders externally or internally, whether it's employees as well, it's kind of an all-encompassing thing that's, yeah, it's having buy-in from external buy-in and internal buy-in, and I think that's just really great.
Thank you, Charis. And just, Diana, can we just move on to the next slide, please? So we'll move on to our next section of the discussion, and that is sustainability and today's curriculum. If we move forward again. I'd like to welcome Lucy to the floor to tell us a little bit about her journey so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. So I'll kind of start with school. I was quite interested in science and maths at school, but it was particularly when I was in sixth form, I attended an environmental chemistry course, and that really highlighted the crucial role that chemistry plays in addressing key world issues. And that's kind of what really motivated me to then go on and study chemistry at university. So I was at Durham. I did an integrated master's in chemistry with a year in industry. So I chose this course particularly because I was keen for the opportunity to apply the kind of skills and knowledge that I developed actually within a company. So for the final year of my degree, I was at Johnson Matthey in the Catalyst research team, and here I carried out my master's research project. And really having that kind of experience working in the chemical industry, it was really interesting to see how chemistry is actually being used by a company to develop solutions. And actually having that placement year helped me decide that I'd like to pursue a career within the chemical industry. So I was really glad to have had that kind of year's experience to help make that decision. When I was graduating, I wasn't kind of sure exactly the kind of role that I'd like within the chemical industry. So I was looking at kind of graduate programs that give you an opportunity to try a few different placements within a company. And I was particularly attracted to Croda due to the clear focus on sustainable innovation. And so I was accepted onto Croda's graduate development programme, and that consists of 3 year-long placements in different roles across the company. So it's a chance to get exposure to different functions, and that really appealed to me. And I'd say so far my roles at Croda have really enabled me to use chemistry to deliver positive impacts relating to sustainability. So my first role was in the analytical chemistry team. That was at our Rawcliffe Bridge manufacturing site in East Yorkshire. And my role there was kind of centred on developing more sustainable analytical methods to test the products made at the site. So for example, a lot of the tests are gas chromatography methods that historically used helium, which is non-renewable and the supply is actually running out. So I was working on developing procedures that used hydrogen instead, that's made from water, so it's renewable. My second placement was in our group sustainability team. So I was actually out of the lab for a year, and I was working on supporting Croda's progress in achieving our various sustainability targets that we have. So for that, I was collaborating with our manufacturing sites, labs and offices all over the world in creating and implementing their decarbonisation roadmaps. And also I was contributing to enhancing our sustainability reporting, so improving the quality of the data and helping Croda measure progress against our targets more accurately. My final placement on the graduate programme, which is where I am currently, is in the research and development team with Incotec, who are the seed enhancement unit of Croda's life sciences business. And Incotec really develop technologies to drive sustainable agriculture. So they're providing solutions to improve seed resilience and performance. And I'm particularly focused on research into abiotic stress, so protecting crops from non-living environmental factors that can have negative impacts, things like drought, that as we're seeing becoming increasingly common. And finally, kind of beyond my roles within Croda, I also have been involved in various equity, diversity and inclusion initiatives. So I currently lead our gender equality group, which is part of the UK ED&I subcommittee. And I also take part in outreach activities. So currently I'm involved in I'm a Scientist, which is an online programme aiming to kind of engage young people with science by connecting them with scientists and giving them the opportunity to ask them questions. So yeah, that was it from me.
Thank you, Lucy. That was a perfect insight, and it's made me so much more interested. Even from like the graduate development program, it sounds like you've had a really great time over the past few years, getting to see different parts of the company, but getting the chance to see different sort of groups and how they work, not just necessarily lab-based and research things. So thank you for sharing that with the group. And if we could just move forward, Diana. In today's ever-changing sustainability journey, how do you see education changing to keep up with the new technologies? I'm going to go straight to Lucy there. and
Yeah,
then to Joy. Thank you.
I can. I think definitely more kind of courses at school and university level will incorporate sustainability, and I think at kind of varying levels of detail. So reflecting that even if people aren't going into a sustainability role necessarily, it's becoming more likely that the work they'll do will involve some aspect of sustainability. So I think it really needs to become more part of the kind of courses, and also kind of focusing on the core skills that are required, because as we know that technology is always changing, but I think there are still core skills that will always be required.
Thank you. Joy?
Yeah, just saying a little bit what you just said then. When you talked about your career journey, it really made me think about the fact that it was telling a story. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we talk about sustainability stories. And you've talked about new tech there. I think that's going to be quite a challenge in education. And it is more about those core skills and career awareness. And we talk about big data. And that's going to be something, that's going to be a bigger and bigger career opportunity. But children have to learn how to handle small data first. And it's part of that journey. Those core skills are really important to keep developing those and show them what new tech is in industry. Make that connection, but don't necessarily expect schools to keep up with it. For schools to even have half decent microscopes and so on is a big challenge. So I think that's, again, it harks back to that industry education connection. I think industry should be sharing what that new technology is, and schools should be talking about sustainability stories. With my other hat on, not with industry, we're actually writing a new primary science curriculum, working with Oak National Academy. And one of the roles that we've been given is to put climate change and sustainability as a thread through that curriculum, and that's going to be introduced to teachers over this current academic year. And it's really interesting seeing what can you do with primary children to start them on that journey. But you also realise we have a resource that has been sponsored by Thomas Swan. We've also had Croda involved in that. Johnson Matthey involved in that, and obviously there's other companies on the line today that we work with as well. But those sustainability stories are all about what is industry doing to help, if you like, solve the problems. When we do those activities with children and when we make those connections between their science and what industry's doing, one of the sort of unintended outcomes, but almost shouldn't have been unintended, was relieving climate anxiety. That it's starting quite young in children who are getting these negative messages, rightly so to some extent, about what's happening in the world. But we have to then share stories about what industry's doing, what scientists and engineers are doing to problem solve, and seeing that as a green career. We sometimes use the term green career, and yet engineers might not be seen as a green career, and yet they are. They're the problem solvers of the future, and making those connections through stories at a young age is really important. And so I think the new tech, to some extent, is a challenge for education, certainly at primary and secondary school age. And that's where I think industry can play a part by introducing the notion, not necessarily the technical detail, but just this is what we are using.
Thank you. And I'd definitely be interested to know more about that from a SABIC point of view, as we've recently reinstated our connection with schools. One of the things that crop up quite a lot is what is on the curriculum, what can we come in and sort of, it'll be relevant for the children and it'll relate to their science lessons. So I'd be so interested to know more about that.
Amy, I'm so glad you said that, because for me, the starting point of anybody is to say, what is the science in the curriculum already? And actually, if you look at the top end of primary, year 5, 6, you can look at the chemistry, it's a few bullet points. It's not rocket science, but that's so true. I'm so glad you made that point. Start with the science that they're having to learn. Don't try and introduce lots of new ideas about molecules or reactions, because it's not there in their curriculum. And I think that I'd love to talk to you more about it, Amy.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And if we could just move on, Diana. I'm going to have to do this, but can we maybe keep it to 2 answers and keep it quick, because I am cautious of the time and everyone's got very busy days, I'm sure. So do we feel educational establishments have the right leads to the newest technologies, teaching on the latest findings? And I'll go straight to Chantal there. Thank you.
I think it's a difficult question. I think obviously a lot of research is done within these educational establishments, but I know, obviously from my experience on the apprenticeship course, I know that a lot of the research done in educational establishments isn't really applicable to industry. Perhaps they're looking into new materials for longer life batteries, but maybe these materials have to be kept at a temperature that isn't feasible to achieve industry. And I think that's perhaps where the gaps are in educational establishments, are on kind of applicability and those real life kind of situations where it's not a carefully controlled educational laboratory environment where you can't control all the variables. You have to deal with unpredictability and changeability, and I think that's the gap really. I think a lot of the general information and theories are there, but they're just not always relevant in real life application.
Yeah, it's an interesting and perfect point you've made there, Chantal. Thank you. And straight to Con.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to echo what Chantal said. You know, a lot of really interesting research goes on at university and educational environments. I'm obviously going to say that, but you know, from a green chemistry perspective, one of the things that we teach is you've got to address the triple bottom line. So whatever you're doing has got to be good for the environment, it's got to be good for society, but it's also got to work economically. And I think, you know, a lot of the research that we do, the economics don't tend to come into it. And I've seen this as well from, you know, I'm also a CTO of a startup. And what works in the lab doesn't always work in industry. And so I know from a lot of my own teaching, certainly things like when you're looking at biorefinery concepts and where those are being implemented, the really exciting, interesting stuff isn't coming from out of universities. It's coming from SMEs who are being really innovative and are getting things over the line or up to a certain scale. And yes, they are academically very interesting, but the most important thing is that economically they make sense, and that's why they're being able to flourish. And it's the importance of academia and industry working together to then get these concepts across.
Thank you. And Diana, could we just move on to the next slide, please? I've got all these really big questions coming up now when time's really tight and we've got all these passionate people on this subject in one place. Why is ED&I so important in chemistry careers? How can we promote diversity within chemistry? Lucy.
Yeah, I think in all workplaces, like an inclusive environment is really important. So everyone has the same access to opportunities and can contribute fully. But particularly within chemistry, I think diversity is really beneficial. Like the positive impact it can have on innovation, where everyone has different experiences, different diversity of thought, and that can really lead to increased creativity. So I think that's why it's particularly important. And kind of promoting diversity within chemistry, I think that really links to our kind of earlier discussion about starting with young people and engaging them with science, kind of outreach to show them what it's like working in the chemical industry and trying to challenge the perceptions of what a scientist has looked like. I think it's kind of what Joy has already mentioned about showing chemistry really is for everyone. So yeah, I think kind of starting early, but also focusing on retaining people. So the kind of leaky pipeline effect, where we see talent leaving the industry, I think it's important to consider the role that ED&I plays there as well. So yeah.
Thanks, Lucy. Con?
Yeah, and it's one that I say to the students now, that that they're going to go out and have their careers in the most interesting time that the chemical industry's ever had. We're going to shift away from petrochemicals. Everything's going to become much more circular. It's not an evolution, it's a revolution. So it is the most impactful, exciting time ever to be a chemist. And if everybody you've got working in that's come through the same pipeline, they've been taught the same way, they think the same way, they're going to come up with the same solutions. And that's not going to work. So, we need people from a variety of different backgrounds who've got to where they've got to by a variety of different routes. So they approach things in a different way. We're sort of saying things that we've all already said before, but chemistry, it's not one person coming up with one idea, or in the sciences, they're all integrated. We're all working in teams. It's big problems that require group activities, and so you need these contributions from different viewpoints in order to be able to meet these challenges. And again, I don't have to say much because Lucy said it really well. That we want to get kids, we want to get people that haven't previously thought that STEM was for them, because it very much is, because we need their input, and we need that different thought and different viewpoint.
Thank you. Aileen?
Yeah, I echo everything that's been said. I think that there has to be an appreciation that the world is a different place to the place it was when, I guess, like myself and others came into the industry, and people are encouraged now to talk about the things that they need and the things that they want in a career, which is different to what certainly when I was coming into the industry, I was taught at home, don't just go in, do whatever you're asked, and don't kick up a fuss. And that was wrong. And a lot of times when I felt I was struggling and I needed extra support, or things were going on in my personal life and I needed support, I didn't share it, and I didn't maybe get the support when I needed it, and it made my employment a bit hard at times. And I think that we encourage people to be open and to share, and if they need flexibility or they need additional things. A lot of people are now caring for relatives because people are living longer. And again, that was slightly different. I guess, like, my grandparents died quite young. My mum didn't look after elderly parents, and things are changing now. And I think that we have to create an environment where people can be open, they can share what they need, and that we as an employer in an environment are open to that and can be flexible and can give them the support that they need. Because I guess, going back to what Con said, we will just end up having what we've always had if we have the same environment and the same types of people. And we have to encourage that anyone can come into our industry regardless of their background, because we want that diversity of thought, and we want that different perspective.
Thank you, Aileen. And I think that's so important what you said there, because at the moment, sustainability is a big word, but I think sustainability relates to things like that as well. Then processes also need to be sustainable to keep people in their jobs, and they can do it in a way that is sustainable for them. Thank you. I'll quickly go to Chantal, and then we'll have to move on.
Yeah, this is a very quick one because I know there's already been a lot of valuable insights provided. But I just wanted to take a slightly different approach and say that science is so important to how we live our lives. And I think EDI is so important because I feel like everybody should have input and control over their lives. And that needs to include people from different backgrounds. So for disability, we need to be involved in the science, particularly when that research is around the disability. For example, with the autism, when they were looking at identifying the cause of autism, and a lot of the autistic community were against that, they wanted to focus on how to support them to live the best lives rather than looking at what caused it. And I think that's really, I guess, the viewpoint that I wanted to present, that it's not just about getting these diversity of thoughts in, it's about empowering everybody to have a say on what goes on in society and what goes on in their lives as well.
Thank you, Chantel. And I'm just going to ask you to stay there because next up is a little bit about your journey. So if you'd like to share with the group, that'd be perfect.
Okay. So as I've mentioned previously, I am a degree apprentice chemist at CEPAM. I'm also the founder of the Enable Science Network, which is a network for disabled individuals working within STEM, and it is funded through the Royal Society of Chemistry, Inclusion and Diversity Fund. My career journey is a little bit different to most of the people's on here. So I initially started off in school, wanted to be a teacher, a primary school teacher. And kind of around the time that I left school, I was very ill and I ended up in hospital. I ended up coming out of school and I went to uni to do a geography degree. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish my geography degree and I ended up at home and I spent a lot of time at home. And one of the things that really helped me kind of build structure back into my day was my rabbits, which is why I've included a rabbit there. I'm a bit of a crazy rabbit lady for people that don't know that about me. While I was at home, I started studying with the Open University and I started studying environmental science actually. And what I found was that I was being more drawn to the chemistry topics that people traditionally didn't find as interesting, the chemistry of the soil, the chemistry of where water came from on Earth. And I started to think about my career options. And as somebody with a disability, was I really going to want to go around and do a load of field work for environmental science? Or, would I enjoy more working in a lab? And I got a job in what I call a feeder lab. They take you with no experience and it's a bit of a revolving door job. You don't want to stay there very long. You work very hard for very little money and it's not particularly a pleasant environment to work at. But I'll still be very grateful for that. And it was in a soil lab, so I was testing the soil. I was testing, basically trying to determine how waste needed to be disposed of by determining what contaminants were present in the soil. During that time, I got my diagnosis of autism, which I had never even pictured. I was somebody that generally did very well at school. I think a lot of my neurodivergent traits were passed off as being a bit of a geek and particularly studious. So I was very keen to get out of this first lab. And I actually got a job during COVID working in a microbiology lab within hospital, dealing with lots of different samples. It was a very interesting detour. And during that time, I was trying to still study with the Open University, but obviously with being in hospital with COVID, it was a very busy time and I had to defer my course. And during that time, Stepan actually got in touch with me and asked if I'd be interested in applying for the apprenticeship position there. So I spoke with Stepan and actually took on this role now where I work within the lab. And although Stepan globally is a larger company, in the UK it only has one site. And I think a lot of the apprenticeships come from larger companies. And I think it's a very different experience working within a smaller company. Firstly, I didn't have to go through all the assessment centres that I believe a lot of other people did, which sounds like an experience in itself. But I've been able to get involved in lots of different things. Whilst my role is primarily testing the quality of the surfactants, which are ingredients mostly used in cleaning products, I've been able to get involved in research. I've been able to get involved in the environmental health and safety side of it, in the project planning, in the EDI. Generally, I'm able to kind of go wherever I want to within the company and they will support me in learning that. So I think don't just necessarily look at the big companies, look at the smaller companies where you are. And from Stepan's point of view as well, it's surprising how many people in the local area don't even know that Stepan's there. So that's why I think, engaging with the schools is really important. And kind of outside of my role at Stepan, obviously I work with Enable Science and I have had job roles in the past where I've been asked not to talk about my disability, where I've been sent home by the EDI manager because none of the managers wanted to discuss disability or have anything to do with it. I've been asked to wear lanyards to identify myself as disabled. Lots of things that you just wouldn't think would happen nowadays. And this is kind of what inspired me to set up the Enable Science Network, because it's just so valuable to meet with people with the same experiences as yourself, to hear about how they've navigated it. Because you do start to question if science is for you, if you're good enough, if it's going to be achievable, if you're ever going to be able to get past these barriers. And so far, we're still in the very early stages, but we've had a lot of really exciting things happening lately. So we've released our Spotlight Series poster resources, which are a set of 12 poster resources, with each poster resource featuring a disabled scientist, their work and their experience of disability. And we're going to be building on that with the Raising Aspirations project, where we're going to design experiments around the work of the disabled scientists. And we're also hosting an EDI in STEM showcase, where we're going to bring together all the different organisations working to promote EDI in STEM. Because I think it's about, as we've said, in terms of schools and industry, it's the same with EDI. We need to build those connections with schools, with industry, so that we're not all just working separately and making little inroads, that we can all come together and make a bigger impact across the industry. So that's me.
Thank you very much for that, Chantal. And I'm aware of the time now completely. We did have a few more questions to go through, but I'll end it there. And I think, Chantal, you were the perfect person to end on for our session this morning. So Diana, if you'd like to just go to the last slide within the presentation. I'd say any further questions, but we've come to the end of our time. So thank you very much, and thank you so much to the special guests who've joined us this morning. The input that's created to the conversations that we've had has been fantastic. And you can see all of our socials on there. This is, of course, a pre-recorded session, so this will be getting shared on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, hopefully within Chemistry Week this week, so as a form of celebration. So I'd just like to say once again, thank you and have a fantastic day.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.